Good morning, everyone. Today, I'll be sharing to you um, about biodiversity and health society. So, for this topic, this will be our intended learning outcome. So, you should be able to determine the interrelatedness of society, environment, and health. Okay, so we begin with the definition of biodiversity. So, I know for most of us, most if not all, when we hear the word biodiversity, what comes into our mind are most likely those animals which are considered by those government organizations. So for example, the DNR, which those organisms which they consider as kind of extinct, endangered. Okay, so that would initially come into our mind when we hear the word biodiversity. Okay, but definition says that biodiversity refers to variety of life forms. So these are not those organisms which are considered to be rare, endangered, big, attractive, unattractive. Okay, so it includes every living thing. Also, biodiversity refers to more than individual species. It includes the genes they contain and the ecosystem and habitats of which they form a part. In other words, biodiversity underpins all life on Earth and refers to biological variety in all its forms, from genetic makeup of plants and animals to cultural diversity. Okay, so in a nutshell, we can classify or we can categorize biodiversity into three levels. We have genetic diversity, we have species diversity, and we also have ecological diversity. Okay, so for the genetic diversity, when we look at the figure, the first figure, um, these are all bananas, but they differ in terms of its color. All these bananas are already ripe, but then again, they differ in terms of its color. So some are red, some are yellow, and some are green. Okay, so it's because it's determined by their genetic makeup. So and that genetic makeup or that genotype are expressed as their physical attributes. Okay, so when we go to or when we proceed to species diversity. Okay, so we can see here that these are same animals, but then again, they differ in terms of color, in terms of height, and among other attributes. Okay, but I would like to give you some other example with respect to genetic and species diversity. Okay, so when we compare ourselves with our siblings, of course, we have the same parents. We can really see that we differ in terms of our physical appearance, even in terms of our capacity, and among other parameters which we can be compared of. Okay, and take note, we are born with the same parents, so most likely uh, we should have been kind of similarities. But again, we see variation. Although we see similarities, but we really see variation. Okay, and that's because it's determined by the genetic makeup that we have. Okay, so when we go to species diversity, I think we can compare ourselves or we Filipinos with our neighboring countries, so such as Singapore, Malaysian, Vietnamese. Okay, so um, when we look at ourselves, we Filipinos, we have some certain physical characteristics, unique or inherent among us, which we do not normally observe with our neighbors. Okay, so for example, these Vietnamese, in terms of skin color, most of them are white, and in terms of their eyes, the shape is actually different with us. Okay, and that shows that there is diversity even we are of the same species. So we are all Homo sapiens, but then again, there is variation. Okay, and how is it different with ecological diversity then? Ecological diversity, there is diversity in terms of ecological region. It is because the forms of life present in one region is very different with the forms of life existing in another region. For example, here in the tropical region, so we have dense forest. And with this dense forest, we get to see animals, different plants, uh, and and among others. So for example, we get to see Philippine eagle because that's endemic here in the Philippines, no? But when we go to or that's really adapted. That organism is adapted with the ecological region it currently lives, no. But when we compare the set of lives or the life forms living with other ecological regions, such as those living in a temperate region, um, well, we don't get we will not expect that we'll see a Philippine eagle there. It's because it's the Philippine eagle isn't adapted to that particular climate or to that particular region. So with that, there is diversity or there is variation in terms of ecological regions. Again, the life forms that we see from one region will not be the same with the life forms you get to see with another region. Okay, so by definition, genetic diversity refers to the variation among the genetic resources of the organisms. Every individual of a particular species differs from each other in their genetic constitutions. Again, an example is that we and our siblings, we have the same parents, but we have different genetic makeup. Okay, next, species diversity. It refers to the variety of different types of species found in a particular area. It is the biodiversity at the most basic level, and it includes all the species ranging from plants to different microorganisms. Finally, we have ecological biodiversity. So it refers to the variation in the plant and animal species living together and connected by food chains and food webs. It is the different observed among the different ecosystems in the region. And by the way, even without comparing the terrestrial, no, such as what I said a while ago, the the temperate region and those in the tropical region, um, if we compare the terrestrial ecosystem with the marine ecosystem, well, they're really, really different because, for example, you don't get to see fish in a terrestrial setup, not unless if it's gonna go on in the aquarium. But then again, the fish is still nurtured in a water. So again, there is variation in terms of life forms living in the marine and in the terrestrial and in aquatic ecosystem. Okay, so now what do we get from these biodiversity, or in other words, what are the core values that we humans place on biodiversity? First is economic. So economic would refer to biodiversity providing us humans with raw materials for consumption and production. So many livelihoods, such as those of farmers, fishermen, and timber workers, are dependent on biodiversity. Okay, next one is ecological support. Um, by the way, that economic support, I think when we think about biodiversity or when we think about natural resources, the first thing that would really come into our mind is on economic support. Uh, Most likely because yes, we get our fundamental basic needs with nature, but some other services provided by biodiversity may be overseen. But then again, despite the fact that these services are overseen, they're really providing us these services. So second is ecological support. So biodiversity provides functioning ecosystem that supply oxygen, clean air and water, pollination of plants, pest control, wastewater treatment, and many ecosystem services. Next is recreation. So there are many recreational pursuits which rely on our biodiversity or on our unique biodiversity, such as bird watching, hiking, camping, and fishing. So with this, our tourism industry really depends on biodiversity. So an example of recreational services provided or recreational service provided by nature is the whale shark watching in Oslo. So here, as you can see in the diagram, so we get to see a lot of botanding in Filipino, or I think in dialect. I don't know if, but here in Cebu it's called botanding. So I don't know if how it's called with the other places here in the Philippines. But then again, it's botanding, no. Um, so it's or whale shark. Okay, so these are an example of a recreational purpose or recreational service of biodiversity. Um, and so but this is located in the Tanjung Strait one. I don't know if because Tanjung Strait is one of the largest marine protected areas here in the Philippines. I think fishing is not allowed here, so that's why what we can get here is only the whale shark watching. But I don't know if still fishing exists. But by law, if it's a marine protected area, of course, fishing is not allowed. Okay, so um, the next service is cultural. So some of our culture are closely connected to biodiversity through the expression of identity, through spirituality, and through aesthetic appreciation. And indigenous people have strong connections and obligations to biodiversity arising from spiritual beliefs about animals and plants. So I think it's very, for us living here in the mainstream society, we don't get to appreciate this much. But for our brothers and sisters living in the countryside, in mountain regions, and even with our ancestors who used to praise these trees, these rivers as their gods. So that is one purpose of cultural. That's one purpose of biodiversity. That's cultural service. Next one is scientific. Biodiversity represents a wealth of systematic ecological data that help us to understand the natural world and its origins. Okay, so when we study about the history of the Earth, such as uh, ang temperature, no, we get to rely on the sediments, no, um, on the rings of the trees. So that is also one of the services provided by biodiversity, which is scientific, which in other words, helping us to conduct scientific research. So example of this scientific research is on understanding the natural world and its origins. Okay, so um, we can tone down those five services into four ecosystem services. Um, any loss or deterioration in the condition of biodiversity can compromise all the values outlined in the previous slides and affect human well being. So, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment in 2005 was the first global effort to examine links between human well being and biodiversity. The assessment found benefits to societies from biodiversity in material welfare, security of communities, resilience of local economies, relation among groups in communities, and human health. So, all in all, they have summarized these services provided by biodiversity into four. So we have provisioning, it may be economic sa katong first nga it may be that's economic ang equivalent niya sa katong first nga atong gidiscuss discuss rather. Then we also have regulating, we have supporting, and we also have cultural. Okay, so the big question now is how is biodiversity related to our health, specifically specifically to human health, and even in the health of the society in general. Okay, so human health ultimately depends upon ecosystem products and services, such as availability of fresh water, food, and fuel resources. So these are requisite for good human health and productive livelihoods. So we cannot imagine ourselves without water, without food. So we will not really exist in this world. No, we will not be able to sustain the life that we have. Okay, so um, in other words, when we think about biodiversity, so it is not just related to health because we get the medicine here, that we get medicine from nature, but these services, these basic needs that we get, uh, is like are the reasons why we have good health. Okay, so biodiversity loss can have significant direct human health impacts if ecosystem services are no longer adequate to meet social needs. Okay, so indirectly, changes in ecosystem services would affect livelihoods, income, local migration, and on occasion may even cause exacerbate political conflict. So that's one. This is one of the reason why, for example, the West Philippine Sea. So there are a lot of territorial claims, not just within the Philippines and China, but even our neighboring countries. It's because of the plethora of resources we have in there, and with these resources, well, basically these resources can sustain or can supply our basic needs. Okay, and so because of these territorial claims, there are political conflicts. Okay, so next, significant medical and pharmacological discoveries are made through greater understanding of the Earth's biodiversity. So, loss in biodiversity may limit discovery of potential treatments for many diseases and health problems. Okay, so that's the reason why, if there are plants which are endangered, um, are some of our government organizations, again example like the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, um are really pushing some policies, guidelines, such in order for those organisms to be protected. Okay, because we don't know, maybe at present, um, we do not see its medicinal value or what other values it has, but sooner or later we might realize that's very important, and it's too late. Okay, it becomes extinct. So um, that's why we need to be responsible with these plants. No. Um, so in the following slides, I'll be presenting to you some pharmacologically significant plants here in the Philippines, from the study of Karang and Buot. It's entitled "A Checklist of the Orders and Families of Medicinal Plants in the Philippines." Okay, so first, we have the water lily. It is used to treat skin diseases. We also have this one, the Peperomia pellucida. Um, its local name is Sinao Sinao. So its use rather is to treat urinary problems. We also have the Sarcanda glabra. Usage or its use is for urinary and kidney problems. Same with Sinao Sinao. We also have this one, the Averroa bilimbe, or um, what do you call this one here in our dialect? Um, what's this? Uh, anyway, um, but I guess most of you, if not all, are able to eat already this fruit. So it's used to treat skin diseases. Okay, so we also have the Kahanus Kajan. So its medicinal importance are for diabetes and constipation. So this one, the Euphorbia errata, very popular for those having dengue fever. Um, this medicinal plant, or this plant is used to treat if you have kanang dengue fever, no. So in other words, it's used for malaria. Okay, so we also have the Pisidium guava or bayabas. So it is used for skin diseases because of its antiseptic properties. So I recall when I was still a kid. So after circumcision, um, my sister kanang boil some leaves of it, or we term it in a process called decoction, and thus katong decocted extract will be used to wash the circumcised surface of our organ, to facilitate or to fasten the healing of our wound. Okay, so we also have Mordica charantia, or ampalaya. Okay, so it's bitter. So um, and it's used to treat diabetes mellitus, chronic colitis, and bacillary dysentery. So next one is mango, or Mangifera indica. Its medicinal uh, functions include treatment for diarrhea, uh, leukorrhea, and urinary problems. Then we also have this one, the Pittosporum pitandrum. Okay, so it's used to treat bronchitis, And we have Biden's Pilosa for mouthwash if you have toothaches or if you have toothache. Then we have Blumea balsamifera or Sambong. So used to treat kidney problems and lumbago. Okay, next we have this Vitex nigondoil or lagunding. Okay, so it is used to treat coughs, sores, diarrhea, cholera, fever, liver diseases, and cardiac tonic. Okay, so this is very famous for us, especially those living in the countryside. So this is really the initial remedy when one gets or cough. Okay, so like we also have these Cataranthus roseus. It's used to treat cancers. Then we have Solanum torvum for convulsions, asthma, syphilis, and gout. Then we have Camelina diffusa. This used to treat burns and boils. We have aloe vera for burns, but it has as well kind of aesthetic uses. Okay. Then we have the Musa sapentium for headache, diarrhea, dysmenorrhea, and menorrhagia. Okay, so we have Colocasia esculenta for arterial hemorrhage. We have the coconut for earache, toothache, and leprosy. Then we have Curcuma longa or Dayao for neuralgia, muscle pains, and bruises. Okay, so now those plants which I presented to you earlier, maybe 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 large in terms of density, but we don't know that sooner or later this may turn endangered, or worst, it might become extinct. Okay, so with that, there is a growing concern about the health consequences of biodiversity loss. So biodiversity changes affect ecosystem functioning, and significant disruptions of ecosystem can result in life-sustaining ecosystem goods and services. So biodiversity loss also means that we are losing before discovery many of nature's chemicals and genes of the kind that have already provided humankind with enormous benefits. Okay, so we also have other plant and fungi which are kind of threatened. Um, and these are medicinally important plants, such as the Taverniera abyssinica. So this plant is normally found in the African region. So the shrub, when its reddish flower, is harvested for its roots to treat sudden illnesses, fevers, and abdominal pain. We also have the Pacific yew tree. It's very important for those cancer patients because we derived here the Taxol, which is commonly used for chemotherapy treatments. Then we also have the flowering poppy plant, which is some of the world's most widely used painkillers. Morphines and codeines are derived from these plants. Okay, so based on these articles, so one reason why these plants turn to be endangered or threatened is land clearing and deforestation, or in other words, habitat fragmentation. So it's a key driver for the loss of plant and fungi species. So how is habitat fragmentation so dangerous that it can threaten certain plant species? Okay, so let's take this illustration for example. Okay. Okay. So let's take that this is the area where the plant is living, and so it is only adapted to this area. So we know that plants are not motile, or not they are not mobile. Meaning to say, they cannot transfer from one region to another. So basically, if their habitat is fragmented, so there is no chance for them to transfer to other region. And if ever this plant, as I said a while ago, is only adapted to this specific region of the forest, and so even if you're going to plant these plant species to this part of the forest, still it will not survive because again it's not adapted to other regions of the forest. So that's the danger of habitat fragmentation. Good for us humans because we can adapt, we can move. So if ever our habitat is fragmented, so we can move to other places. It's because we can walk. um, it's good for us, but we don't know what is likely the limit of our capacity that will not be affected by these habitat fragmentation. um, because it is not just plants, other animals and plants which are affected by habitat fragmentation. We are also affected. Okay, so for example, the rising of the sea levels. Okay, so especially those living among kind of coastal regions. So they are living into that particular region, and if the sea levels would rise continuously to the point that their habitats are being covered with water, so that's an example of habitat fragmentation. But then again, it's fortunate for us humans because we can move. So we can move or transfer to areas above sea level or which is far from the rise of these sea levels. Okay, so um, okay, a second. Okay, so yeah. um, So, what are the importance then of biodiversity for health research and traditional medicine? So, um, again, one reason why biodiversity and health are is related is because of the tradition. It's because of the medicine that we derive from nature. Okay, so traditional medicine continues to play an essential role in healthcare, especially in primary healthcare. So traditional medicines are estimated to be used by 60% of the world's population, and in some countries are extensively incorporated into the public health system. Medicinal plants use is the most common medication tool in traditional medicine and complementary medicine worldwide. So medicinal plants are supplied through the collection from wild population and cultivation. So many communities rely on natural products collected from ecosystem for medicinal and cultural purposes in addition to food. Okay, so I think for us here living in the city, most likely we do not appreciate much these traditional medicines. It's because, for example, when we have fever, eventually we'll go to drugstore and buy paracetamol. If we have um, if you have a cough, we buy some brands of uh, medicine which can treat our cough, like mga Solmux, sa panadihan, no? But then again, for those people living, especially in the countryside, um, their primary resort when they have these illnesses are, of course, these medicinal plants. Okay, so that's why it's very, very important. But even these synthetic drugs that we have are still coming from the nature. So even if we already have these processed drugs, again, we cannot discount or discredit the importance of these medicinal plants. Okay, so I also had a study conducted um, some years back, I think 2017. These are some of it's an inventory or ethnobotanical inventory of pharmacologically significant plants used by manobos in the northern most Surigao, those who are here in the Philippines. Okay, so uh, these manobos are a certain tribe in Mindanao. Okay, usually they live in highlands or in mountain regions. So when I conducted this study in Surigao, those where I'm coming from, so I had to climb a mountain just to reach them. And these are the plants which so far I have discovered, which are of medicinal importance to them. Okay, so there are only I think two plants which I really find it very interesting because um, these are not usually should I say used or known for most of us that it's that these plants are important to them. So one is the for a second one is the calamus muti. It's actually a palm tree. I forgot to insert a picture here. It's a palm tree, which fruit is edible. So what they do with with the palm tree is that they take the roots, and these roots are cleaned, then boiled into water or a process called decoction, and they let these kanang women who after giving birth. So in other words, it's for postpartum care. So again, the decocted extract of the calamus muti root are taken as the medication uh, of those women who are who undergone labor. Uh, then we also have kaning piper beetle or bujo in our term. So it is used to them to treat kanang goiter. Okay. So now, what are the importance of biodiversity for health research and traditional medicines? Um, Although synthetic medicines are available for many purposes, the global need and demand for natural products persist for use as medicinal plants and biomedical research that relies on plants, animals, and microbes to understand human physiology and to treat human diseases. Okay, so now we proceed with the second role of the second role of what's this? Uh, the second importance why biodiversity is related to human health. Okay, so again, the first is it has something to do with the medicine that we derive from nature. Next one is on nutritional impact. Okay, so biodiversity plays a crucial role in human nutrition through its influence on world food production as it ensures the sustainable productivity of soils and provides the genetic resources for all crops, livestock, and marine species harvested for food. Access to a sufficiency of nutritious variety of food is fundamental determinant of health. Nutrition and biodiversity are linked at many levels. The ecosystem, with food production as an ecosystem service, the species in the ecosystem, and genetic diversity within the species. Nutritional composition between foods and among varieties, cultivars, or breeds of the same food can differ dramatically, affecting micronutrient availability in the diet. So, healthy local diets with adequate average levels of nutrient intake necessitates maintenance of high biodiversity levels. Okay, so um, this is an example of the nutritional impact of biodiversity. So not just for us humans, but even for other animals here in Earth. Okay, so when you look at the food pyramid, okay, so the first trophic level or the primary producers are composed of marine plants, so such as seagrass, the algae, and the phytoplankton. The second trophic level or the first order consumers are the zooplanktons, the Atlantic blue tang, and the queen conch. Okay, so basically these first trophic levels, organisms under the first trophic levels. And so the process continues up until it reaches the apex or the top predators. So top predators are bluefin tuna and we have the gray reef shark. And if we are to put ourselves, we can also be a part of the top predator because some of us eat sharks, and of course, we eat tuna. Okay, so this is how nutrients is transferred from one organism to another. Okay, so in other words, biodiversity really has an impact to our nutrition. Okay, so intensified and enhanced food production through irrigation, use of fertilizer, plant protection, or the introduction of crop varieties and cropping patterns would affect biodiversity and thus impact global nutritional status and human health. So, habitat simplification, species loss, and species succession often enhances communities' vulnerabilities as a function of environmental receptivity to ill health. Okay, so if before we discussed about significance of biodiversity and health, no, again, two major reasons why they are related is because of are because of um, the medicinal plants we derive from nature, and of course the nutritional impact or the nutrition that we get or the nutrients that we get from the organisms within the biodiversity. Okay, so however, we also have a downside because um, the nature may be reserve as well or can be reserve of these infectious diseases. Okay, so especially that we human our activities are disturbing both the structure and function of ecosystem and alter native biodiversity. So such disturbances reduce the abundance of some organisms. um, for example, we do um, uh, shooting of birds. So that would likely limit their population, but it may cause population growth in others. Okay, so um, for example of this one, kay what's a good example of this one? For example, no, if nasa field, so we get to harvest mga snakes. Kay ang uban they're going to domesticate the snakes, or if not, they're going to what's this to eat the snakes. Okay, so that would mean that would cause population growth for other organisms. Examples, rats. So in the rice field, basically, if there are no more snakes, so rats would the population of rats would grow. So it would also modify the interaction among organisms and alter interactions between organisms and their physical and chemical environments. So patterns of infectious diseases are sensitive to these disturbances. So one example, um, why biodiversity could also be a host of some diseases is ang kaning kuan. If it's really true that coronavirus really spread from bats to us humans. Okay, so please listen to this presentation.
As scientists work to contain the coronavirus, researchers are still trying to figure out where it came from. Early research suggests humans picked up the coronavirus from animals, possibly bats, but it's not clear how the virus made that jump. Science journalist and author David Quammen has been tracking this. He joins me now on the phone. And David, I know you know a lot about this, but I am learning with a lot of other folks here. And a disease that can spread from animals to humans is called zoonosis. Coronavirus is a zoonotic disease. What do we know so far about the coronavirus and how it spread from animal to human?
Well, part of what we know comes from past experience with outbreaks such as SARS in 2002 and 2003. SARS was a very scary new virus when it first appeared in southern China. It was new to humans. It had to come from somewhere, and scientists eventually tracked the SARS virus to bats. Bats are the reservoir hosts, meaning the virus lives in them without causing symptoms. Now, that was part of what rang the alarm bell on coronaviruses. Coronaviruses, SARS is one, this is another. They evolve very quickly. They live in animals, frequently bats. And when we come in contact with bats, we invite those viruses to jump from bats into humans. Because they evolve quickly, they can frequently adapt to us and cause terrible trouble.
If it is, in fact, bats in this case as well, what is it about them that makes them these frequent hosts of viruses, or reservoir hosts, as I believe you just called them?
That's right. Bats seem to be overrepresented as the reservoir hosts for a lot of these scary viruses. SARS viruses, I mentioned, MERS virus, Hendra virus in Australia, Nipah virus in Malaysia, now this one. What is it about bats? Well, a couple of things. First of all, bats are a very diverse order of mammals. 1 in every 4 species of mammal on Earth is a bat. So they are just so diverse, there's a better chance that a virus would come from a bat, just because of those odds of being so diverse. But there are other things. A little bat can live 20 years. A mouse of the same size is lucky to live 2 years. They live, as you can see from your shot, they live in aggregations. They live very intimately bundled together with one another, a good situation for passing viruses from one to another. You talk about social distancing. Bats do not have social distancing.
They don't get that at
So
all,
they
huh?
carry a lot of bats. They carry a lot of viruses.
Fat.
In addition,
Yeah.
their immune systems seem to be dialed down. Their immune systems
Okay.
seem to be less able to clear viruses. So bats frequently are the origin of these things.
So fascinating. I had no idea any of that information about bats. You know so much about not only them, but about this kind of transmission. And you've said before that coronavirus will not be the last transmission like this. Why not? Why can't we stop this?
We can't stop this because the world's wild animals are very diverse. They live in diverse ecosystems, and all of those wild animals carry their own viruses. When we come into contact with those wild animals, disturbing their ecosystems, cutting down forests, building timber camps, catching wild animals for food, we invite those many, many diverse viruses to jump from the animal host into us. We give them the opportunity. And as long as we continue doing that, these viruses will continue jumping into us and causing trouble.
David, as you're talking, we're showing just looping video of all the places that are empty now. Arenas, schools, public places, streets. I'd love to ask you what we can do about this. And I'd like to...
Okay, so this is one reason why biodiversity or why nature is turns to be dangerous at times for our health. Okay, so what you're seeing a while what you were seeing a while ago is if it's really true that bats were the reservoir of these COVID-19 or the novel coronavirus, would likely be again one reason why why nature is also its it has also its negative side. So it turns out to be the reservoir of these viruses. So one reason why bats are good sources or why good reservoir of viruses, it's because as said in the report, they don't have social distancing. They live in aggregation, and these bats are flying. So basically, when they fly from one area to another, so in a particular area they might catch that particular virus, and when they go back to their habitat, and again they're living in aggregation, so the transfer of that viruses are very fast, or is very fast. And what's worse is that would not show any symptoms that they're able to acquire that particular virus. In other words, they're asymptomatic. But when these viruses are transferred to humans, so such as the COVID or the novel coronavirus, well, we show symptoms. So that's one again that's one reason, or that's one downside of biodiversity. Nonetheless, we cannot just discredit or discount the fact that biodiversity offers a lot over these being a reservoir of cunning viruses. Okay, so what we can do best is, again, do not disturb the ecosystem. Eat only those normally part of our diets, and do not domesticate or eat these wild animals. Okay, so
Zoonoses.
okay, so now we proceed to how climate change, biodiversity, and health are related. So, biodiversity provides numerous ecosystem services which are crucial to human well being at present and in the future. So, these services, which I have mentioned a while ago. So, climate change remains to be an integral part of an ecosystem functioning, and human health is impacted directly and indirectly by results of the climatic conditions upon terrestrial and marine ecosystem. So, uh, marine biodiversity is affected by ocean acidification related to levels of carbon in the atmosphere. So, For the case of terrestrial biodiversity, it is influenced by climate variability such as extreme weather events, example drought and flooding, that directly influences ecosystem health and productivity and availability of ecosystem goods and services for human use. Longer term changes in climate would affect the viability and health of ecosystem and influencing shifts in the distribution of plants, pathogens, animals, and even human settlements. So, in a nutshell, biodiversity and health are really, really related, but if climate change would enter into the relationship of biodiversity and health, that would be another story, and that story is not so good, okay? Because climate change would have an impact to biodiversity, and biodiversity and health being related would also mean that there would be a negative impact of biodiversity, for example, biodiversity loss to human health. In other words, there is domino effect. So, what I'm trying to say here, class, is that we should be very responsible with our actions, um, not just with eating those wild animals, but even with our practices towards practices which contributes to global warming or to climate change, because again, it will just go back to us. So it's just a cycle, a never-ending cycle. Okay, so just a declaration. These are the sources of my presentation, and I have already provided the links of the images and videos. Okay, so thank you for listening.